Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today something a little bit different, not a movie. We're talking about Game of Thrones.
Yes.
All of it. Having just watched the final episode, which aired a couple of days ago.
Yes.
Yesterday, in fact.
So let me set the scene. So I wanted to talk about this because I've been seeing the season to season, so to speak.
Yeah, it started in 2011,
Yeah.
I think.
So, and Mike's just seen it all in the last month.
Yeah, I watched them all in the space of 36 days. Not for any not like to do a podcast on it, but just because I guess I fancied it. Like, I thought at the end of the day I should watch it eventually, and the final season was coming up, so if I was going to watch it, I might as well watch it before it gets spoiled.
Yes.
In the end, do you know what I mean?
So, I thought that would make kind of like an interesting contrast, so it might make for interesting conversation. So, but I think we both agree that this last episode is the worst one in the series. I think it's the worst one. I've never been so bored, or seen things coming, or having things underlined so heavily all the way through, and being so portentous and want to be mythic, and it's just so dull.
We should say, as if there was any doubt about this is going to be spoiler heavy. You know?
Yes.
You've seen the show, or you don't care about the show if you listen to this.
That's right. Huh?
It was boring as hell. There were one or two surprises. I don't think either of us expected the Iron Throne to be melted.
No, that was a good one.
Because we both sort of said at the very start of the episode, we both said we can only imagine one way this show ends, which is with a shot of Jon Snow on the Iron Throne.
Yes.
That's kind of what it's been heading towards, and so the kind of a final surprise in it, for me at least, was that doesn't happen at all.
No.
And actually, the whole thing about sort of his parentage and him turning out to be a very important member of a dynasty and the first in line to the throne, ends up meaning very little in this. You know, once Daenerys is dead, the fact that he is supposed to be
that's a problem with the film. Because
I don't think that's a problem at all. That's something I liked.
Well, no, I didn't like that, and I think it is a problem with the film because it's a cheat. You can't say that you have to kill Daenerys, and your parentage is always going to be in the way of her, an obstacle between her and the throne, and kind of give him or attribute to him all the characteristics that will mean uniting all of the Seven Kingdoms, and then kind of at the end say, well, it wasn't that important to begin with. I think that's a cheat. I
disagree. I think because things change in this episode and in the last few episodes, things change, and the fact that I think it was the end of season 7, was it, that it was revealed that he was this Aegon Targaryen, this challenger to the throne if the lineage is to be respected. So it's only kind of recent development that's kind of come in, and then that becomes a threat to Daenerys, but then it's also something that once they're making their own decisions about who can rule this, that and the other, I think that's kind of interesting.
Well, I think it's a cheat because you are saying this about our knowledge of Jon Snow in season 7, but the whole show has been ruled since day one, about this idea of lineage. Lineage has been important to every plot development. It matters that you are the son of king this or. So to chuck it all at the end saying, well, actually, it's not really that important, we're going to vote.
I really like that. That's the thing I maybe like most about the episode.
Well,
is that they decide that this whole thing about Daenerys saying, I want to break the wheel, however much you want to believe that or not, they actually do. And they make a change. And like this, you could actually sense an ending.
They do in a way that isn't consistent with the narrative. And it's a cheat. And they'd like to have it both ways. So, that suggestion saying, well, why not get everybody to vote? Ha 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 ha, how ridiculous. But actually, they do something that is just as inconceivable within that kind of medieval mindset, which is, what the film is kind of trying to emulate. So either lineage is important or it isn't. You can't just say it's important whenever the narrative wants it to be important.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think it's the best written thing in the world, but
the writing was atrocious in this episode.
I liked the idea of it, and I like the sense of sort of. It's a little bit like this is a spoiler, I suppose, for Star Wars: The Last Jedi. If you haven't seen that by now, But in that, there was this whole thing about how Rey, who was introduced in The Force Awakens, was like she was going to turn out to be, Luke Skywalker's daughter or something like that, some important character, and that's why she was in the film basically. And then it turns out she's the daughter of nobody, and in that again, this story which has all been about lineage and about whose dad are you and who's your kids and Anakin and Luke and all the rest of it. Now it's again that's kind of broken in that.
That's different to me. That's sci-fi. It's the future. It can imagine different worlds, but
this isn't history.
This is all about kings and bloody queens, though.
And
so the whole
dragons and magic and knights.
Yeah, but the whole thing is built on lineage. She is the mother of dragons, and that's what gives her this power. So she's the daughter of a king and the mother of dragons. I mean, to have to, at the end say let's just vote is to me a cheat.
Well, I think the show has done certain cheaty things, and actually I think it got. I mean, having watched it all in a big row, I think it got worse after about season 4 or something. I mean, you were telling me, it gets better and better and better.
I thought it got better until this season.
I think it gets better and then it gets worse, because what I found in sort of seasons, in the first few seasons basically, is that the thing that I liked the most about the show is that it's in a really dangerous world, and you really can't rely on anyone to stay alive at any point.
Yes.
And I knew that there were things like the Red Wedding, but I didn't know who died in them, and I didn't know when people would die and who would die. So it was always a surprise when people did. I didn't expect Ned Stark to die in season 1.
Yes.
For instance. I didn't know that he did, and that is a huge shock.
Yes.
And then you go on YouTube and watch the reaction videos of people, filming their mates watching it, and how stunned they are at what happened. That's what I really liked about the show, is that I really couldn't predict things. And then after sort of season 5 or so, I started to feel like I really could. I could predict the way that fights would go. I could predict the way that the plots would develop. And in fights, for instance, there would very often be like there was the Battle of the Bastards, which was between between Ramsay Bolton and Jon Snow, and it was this huge deal where Ramsay Bolton completely fought Jon Snow into a corner. He didn't have the forces, and he was emotionally invested, and he just fought badly, and he was about to die. And then Sansa's mate, Lord Baelish, comes riding in with the cavalry and saves the day. And there was no tension in that fight at all, because you could see exactly how that was going to happen, and you started to feel like you knew who was going to survive.
I think there's a bit of retro aspect element to that, because I remember seeing that when it came out, and actually you didn't know that Jon Snow was going to survive, so...
I felt like I did, that's the thing.
Okay, well
to be fair,
that you did.
I did know that Jon Snow was
so that's bound to have an influence. I mean, I have found it a really fascinating show overall. I really loved the plotting. It was always full of surprises. I love the sexuality of it, I loved its attitude to sex, the way that it treats sex, and the casual way that it also depicts sex. And, people have been saying, oh, well, it's only women who are undressed. That's not true. And actually the fact that kind of men were as equally undressed in lots of scenes was, to me, novel. Yeah, it's something you don't usually see. I loved the whole spectacle of it. And actually, to me... so I was having, not an argument, but a discussion with a friend on Twitter and him saying, oh, I hate it when people say, oh, it's not TV or, it's film or whatever. And I was saying, well, to me, one of the things that Game of Thrones made me think about is, that it's neither film, nor in fact is it TV. It's certainly not TV as I've always known TV, right? Because... kind of some of the shots, some of the special effects, the spectacle of it all, that's all just stuff I'm not used to watching in a television show, and I loved seeing it, and I love that kind of we can now kind of see this. I mean, the reason why I don't think it's TV is many reasons, like so for example, in discussions of certainly American television, you would say, well, television is kind of a delivery mode to advertisers, delivering audiences to advertisers. Well, this doesn't...
HBO's a subscriber service, no advertisers.
So in so many ways, it's, to me, not TV. which is not to say that it's cinema either, and which is not to put a value judgment on it.
It also has a central difference with a lot of American TV in that HBO, I think with all their shows, don't air them until they're finished making them, which in this country seems like that's just the way you make TV. But in America, you put a show on before you've even finished the final, and you can order 10 more episodes, or you can cancel it 10 episodes from the end.
Yes.
Whereas HBO doesn't do that. It operates much more in basically the way everyone else would make TV.
That's right.
You finish it.
I mean, I think we're living in a different epoch, and actually what we're watching on our television screens is something that certainly 30 years ago you would not be seeing, or a large part of it is you would not be seeing. So, our television set has become a delivery system for all kinds of things, including whatever's on your computer. So I just think it's neither film nor TV as we understood it. It's something else, this type of show.
It's HBO.
Well, I don't want to say that because it's not just HBO, right?
Yeah, I know, but it's funny how they really... I don't think that is their slogan anymore. I think their slogan is something like, it's what connects us, or something completely unmemorable. But the thing about it's not television, it's HBO, survives. And there is still this exceptionalism, I think, even though for a while, I mean, HBO didn't have the best programs. They went to things like AMC with Breaking Bad and Mad Men. Other channels started having the Americans, I think, was that on Fox or something? Other channels started putting good money into making a kind of premium dramas, and kind of took some of the prestige away. But still, HBO, no matter if it wasn't putting out The Sopranos and stuff anymore, it was still HBO. There's something different about it.
Actually, I was reading something on Twitter the other day that I thought was very interesting. That people are using Netflix as a verb, right?
Oh yeah.
So you're Netflixing, right?
Netflix and chill.
So actually, watching TV and watching Netflix is considered to be something different. Television is whatever is being broadcast at the moment, right? And then Netflix stands in for not only what's playing on Netflix, but on Now TV and Amazon Prime. Yeah, those subscription things that you have access to. And actually, I thought that was interesting. Do
you think it's true though? Because
no.
I think if someone says I'm going to put on Netflix, they mean Netflix. If they were going to put on Prime, they would say Prime. I don't think it stands in as a catch. Like it's not the same way you say Biro for pen or Hoover for vacuum cleaner. I think you still mean the specific thing you're talking about. But I also agree that putting on Netflix is not the same as putting on the telly.
No, and I think it's actually categorically different, because whenever I go to Netflix, I go in with intentionality. You're always choosing, yeah? Yeah, you
have to.
You have to, that's right. Whereas actually sometimes you just turn on the TV, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of, whatever's there, right? Or, I mean, you might flick through a few channels, but, you're not necessarily watching something you want to watch, and actually you're not necessarily using it to be attentive to it. Whereas actually I think, whenever I turn on something on Netflix, I am watching it. Yeah.
I must say, for me, the only time I really watch TV, like live TV at all, now is sports.
Yes.
I watch Sky Sports, watch Premier League and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I think what I watch on TV, in that sense of TV, whatever's on at the moment, is really the news. I also watch Judge Judy a lot, Yeah, because sometimes I'm just tired, and So there are.
But you don't pick out Judge Judy to watch. It's on when you are watching TV.
Yeah. It's kind of if I come home from work, and really sometimes what you want to do is read a book. But actually, it's weird. I turn the TV on. It's like Company or something, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of you'll choose something easy that could be used as background, but that you could occasionally have a glimpse at, right? And so there are shows that I use for that if they happen to be on. But you turn on the TV, really. Whereas actually I never just turn on Amazon or Prime. You're always looking for something, So anyway, I don't want to belabor this too much, but I actually do think that it's a categorical difference, that it's we're living in a different moment, and we need new ways of talking about it. And actually these terms, film and TV, are so loaded with things from other times, and the way that people used to talk about television as flow and things like that, it just doesn't apply anymore, right? Like it just doesn't, so we need new ways of kind of talking about these programs, and actually I do think that I am surprised at the things that I saw. I mean, I wrote this whole article about a shot or a type of shot in season 5, which I call the spectacular reveal, which is, you'd go in a close-up of something, and then you'd realize that there was somebody in the city, and then the camera would pan, and you'd have this whole sweep of the city, right? Yeah. Or a ship, or a dragon, right? Kind of, that kind of thing that you would expect at a certain time to be available to see only like in VistaVision or Lawrence of Arabia or things like that, right? And actually now it's just happening kind of in your TV monitor, really, so anyway.
That was part of the thing, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't. They were spending so much money on this show. It was an equivalent sort of. It was basically like a cinema budget.
Yes. For
a television program, that was. I'm going to look up, see if I can find the sort of budget figures for Game of Thrones. The pilot reported it cost $5 to $10 million. The first season's budget was estimated at 50 to 60. There was a 15% budget increase for a battle in the second season for $8 million. $8 million for an episode is big money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And particularly now with digital, right? The budgets are particular to this type of show. It's an interesting thing. And it's one of the reasons, the spectacle is one of the reasons why I love the program. And I also love the whole melodrama of it. The kind of fortunes kind of were reversed. New bits of information could like completely change somebody's life, right?
Season 6 apparently was about $10 million, over $10 million per episode. $100 million for a season.
Yeah, so
salaries will have gone up as well.
Yeah, though,
But you also needed more CGI for the dragons.
Yes, I mean the dragons. I mean, what I liked best about this current season was the dragons. I mean, they were amazing to see.
That shot in the last episode that we watched, actually, when he's killed Daenerys and the dragon's kind of mourning her and wailing, and he's just very small on the bottom left and the dragon is on the top right, and it's all kind of just different shades of grey colouring the scene. That was an amazing shot.
Yeah,
that was beautiful.
I mean, I actually did try to project this on a large screen and it doesn't work. Because, as soon as you project it on a large screen, you see the emptiness, and actually there's something very interesting and beautiful about the design of it. It is designed for a television screen, so kind of you'll often see that the screen is broken up into like, let's say 3 large elements, and there'll be like candles creating a pattern, right? So it's stuff that will make a big impact on a television screen. But as soon as you're using a larger screen, you see all the empty spaces, all the ways that the frame isn't used, That's
interesting.
Yes, I think so.
I never thought about that because I was just watching it on my laptop actually, the whole time.
But anyway, what a letdown now.
Well, there were things I liked about. It's a very this particular episode is a very very long slow episode with way too much. And when you think about actually what happens for an hour and 20 minutes,
nothing happens.
It's Daenerys gets killed. Everyone kind of reacts to what happened in the last episode. Jon Snow, they decide he can't be king. He has to get sent off to take the Black again. Bran becomes king, which I hate that fucker. Very, very few things happen. There's a lot of empty space. There's space in the way you did. A lot of time taken, a lot of talking it out, and it has that feeling of sort of the story has ended now. Insofar, and the way I think it kind of communicates that is, it doesn't have enough story left to fill up the final episode.
It could have been a 10-minute short, and all those sweeping shots, these never-ending things of people like kind of the backs of people, floating into something, it's like, it was just so dull. And it did that with every character. So every character got a, let's go into the future kind of never-ending scene. It was just absurd.
But I did like the idea of the breaking the cycle, of the way that things have worked in this world. No matter how much you say, oh well, it wouldn't work like that. How can you put? It's not realistic. I liked that. It's a fantasy, so I give it some sort of give it the leeway to do that. And I think the idea of breaking the cycle is kind of an interesting one. Like that image that Daenerys brought up a few seasons ago of breaking the wheel, and that's an image that kept coming back, how one house is just replaced with another, what I'm going to do is break the wheel, you know. That has resonances. Like you had Sandor Clegane in the last episode going to kill his brother, and Arya's there because she wants to kill the queen, and Arya sees him, and there's this moment of kind of realising, like, I have a choice in this moment to either hold on to all of my fury and grievances and grudges and become him, or I can let them go and have a life of my own, you know. Yes. And there's this idea in that of Sandor Clegane is stuck in this cycle, has been his whole life of trying to get back at his brother and holding on to his fury. She can break that. You know, there's this thing of, which I don't think is very well expressed throughout the show, but there is this thing of how Jaime Lannister has this overarching sort of story of kind of improving, whether he means to or not. Just he has things to hold on to. He has his honour, and he has his he kind of is well-meaning in all sorts of ways, but he keeps on going back to his sister.
Yes.
You know, who is the worst person in the world.
Yes.
I think the show doesn't express it well because it only really expresses that in that moment where he says goodbye to Brienne of Tarth.
Yes.
And vocalises
and doesn't handle that moment well.
It doesn't, and it also hasn't done it really in the rest of the show. But I can see what they were trying to do with that.
Well, I think it was very, very clumsy. You know, so I think they could have made a lot more out of Lannister's death with Cersei. You know, it could have all been filmed better and been given a lot more resonance. I mean, after all, it's fucking incest. You know, they've lost 3 children together. Yeah, they could have done something better with that scene. And also today, I thought, you know, the Jon Snow's murder of Daenerys, I mean, you know, that could have been dramatized better. You barely know what's happening, you know, and actually it doesn't last very long, right? So this is like this transformative moment in the whole series, and that they cut it to nothing, and then they have these enormously long goodbyes to everyone. Yeah. It's absurd.
Well, it's, actually, that moment where he kills Daenerys, not only is it, you know, it takes a second for the blood comes out of her mouth, you realise that's what he's done, but then it cuts to this shot side on where you see the knife sticking out of her chest, or out of her belly, but like he's kind of behind the knife. Like, you want that shot to be silhouetted. Yes. You know, that would be so much more dramatic. And there was a light, you know, very nice bright background because the whole place has been destroyed, for her to be silhouetted against, but they just didn't use it. I don't know why.
And actually, there were like stupid things, like why doesn't he take the knife off once she's dead, right? Like, no, it's true. She's there with the thing sticking out, and you know the dragon has to clutch it with its paw, you know, or whatever you call it, a claw. You know, I mean, come on.
Well, there are. Well, I mean, I said
it's meant to love her, so at least take the fucking thing out.
No one does that in this show, though. But I mean, that's kind of like, it's like how when people, on any television program, when people have phone calls, they pick up the phone and don't say hello, and then they put down the phone and don't say goodbye. You know? And every time I'm going, that's really rude.
Yes, me too.
But this show has a lot of that. And actually, I think that kind of stuff got worse in this. Like, you had this thing about how, in the first few seasons, where you had this war between the Starks and the Lannisters and all the rest of it, it was a long, ongoing thing, and there was all this talk of, well, their people are going to be here, and we're going to be here, and it's going to take us 2 weeks to get there. Like, the whole, you know, Westeros is supposed to be a big place. It takes a long time to travel places. In this season, you have an episode where, like, right at the south of the continent, Daenerys hears, you know, she basically says, I'm going to need to take the dragon north to fight at the wall, fight the Night King, and like 5 minutes later, she's there. You suddenly have no idea, like, how far these distances, or how many people live in this place. They always seem to be able to just marshal a big old army. You know, these people seem to come out of nowhere. Like, you think, so many people have died in the wars in this show so far, you think they would actually be running out of people.
Yes.
So,
well, that's the theme of this series, that they are running out of people. But what I found most upsetting is that, so one of the things that I liked about the series is that on the one hand it's very melodramatic, and occasionally quite funny, actually, but it's very unsentimental. Yeah, and it's very brutal. People die and they get killed in horrible ways, and you know, it's very unsentimental. And then this whole last episode is the most crappily sentimental thing I've ever seen. And Brienne of Tarth, you know, writing that, you know, epistolary
she's filling in Jaime Lannister's entry in the kind of Book of Knights. No, I mean, I agree with you. I thought she had a very, very bad ending. I think she's my favourite character in the whole show. We were discussing this. You say you like Arya.
Yes,
I like Arya as well. But Brienne of Tarth I always found really interesting because
I love her as well. Yes,
because the whole thing of her, she's 7 foot tall and kind of a big hulking sort of woman, and people take the piss out of her all the time. They call her Brienne the Beauty in an ironic way, and she basically wants to be in the man's game. She wants to be a knight. She wants to be a king's protector, or whatever the word is. I can't remember, for like the king's king's protector. And she takes her job really seriously. So like she's in service to someone she doesn't fucking let up. She's always on about it. Yes. She's in service to.
She's a woman of her word.
Completely, right? But like she's also a knight. But then you can also tell like it kind of hurts her that she can't be a knight. Because that's a man's thing. Which is why there was that thing where they all get around the table and Jaime Lannister knights her, and she's super happy and like it means a lot and it's wonderful. And then in this last episode. So she had this thing where she was, when she was in service to Catelyn Stark said, take Jaime Lannister, who's our captive, back to King's Landing and trade him with my daughters, protect my daughters, right? And Jaime Lannister was being an arsehole to her the whole time, but they developed a kind of respect and friendship for each other, which lasts through to this final season. And they've defeated the army of the dead, right? And they're all celebrating, how the hell did we win that? And they're drinking, and it's Tyrion, Jaime, Brienne, Podrick, one or two other people maybe, and they're just sitting around a table drinking, and they're playing this drinking game which has been in the show before, where it's a little bit like I Never, except you ask someone a specific question about their past, and they have to keep on drinking until you say something that isn't true, and then you have to drink. And they're asking questions about Brienne, and then the one thing comes up, you're a virgin. And then she is, she's embarrassed, and the show robs her of her dignity in this episode, I think, because then it becomes. There's also this thing about how there's this character Tormund, who's one of the wildlings who kind of Jon befriended, who has a thing for Brienne and thinks that he can sort of get with her, despite the fact she's shown no interest in him. And then Jaime chases her off basically and tries to console her, and Tormund's like, he stole my woman. Like, what are you talking about? How has she become? How has the show killed her dignity by turning her into this item that people are just chasing now? And then it's this thing of how she admits to Jaime, yeah, I'm a virgin, and so they sleep together, and that's meaningful, and I kind of like that.
It's meaningful to both.
And then in the morning, she wakes up, he's not there, she's just in a robe, which I think is important because the whole time you see her, she's in armour. Like, she lives in armour all the time. This final scene in this episode for her, she's in a robe, and she runs outside, and Jaime's there about to ride off because he's in love with Cersei. Says all this stuff about how secretly I'm a really bad person, I've never been good and all this, and I love Cersei, and that makes me the worst person in the world. And she ends up crying, basically, almost on her knees in the dirt in this courtyard at 4 a.m.
It betrays the character.
I hated that so much. I hated it. I loved her so much, and I still love her. I hated what the show did to her. It's like the show didn't understand.
I can imagine you crying over a woman who's left.
Yeah. I know I went on for a bit there, but I thought that's such a betrayal of that character, and it's like the show didn't understand itself.
Yes. Well, actually, I think the show not understanding itself is a very good description of this last season. And I think particularly this last episode. Yes. I mean, I think the whole treatment of Jon Snow is absurd. I mean, he's a man who's come back from the dead. So aside from his parentage, he's been built up this way, and then kind of that's the send-off he's given. I just kind of, and then, you're right about Bran. Like, where the fuck did he come from? I thought he was going to be the sage in the tree, right? He sees the past, he sees the future. How the fuck is he going to be a practical king, right? Like, it just makes no sense.
I can see what the show was aiming at with that, because it's saying... I think what the show is ultimately trying to say at this point is people have been fighting over this throne for so long, and it's just led to death and destruction. The only people who are fit to rule are those who have no interest in doing so.
But that's the reason for having Jon Snow take it.
It's also... Yeah, it is.
So,
It's like... So I can sort of see the intention to a degree.
I think the writers were just saying, "Ooh, everyone will expect Jon Snow. Let's be clever."
I think there's...
And actually, they weren't clever, and they haven't kind of come up with a better solution.
I agree with that.
A couple of more things, actually. You see, one of the things that I found so fascinating about the show was the global reach of it. So it's not that television previously or films previously were not global, but, you know, when there was the whole Who Shot JR thing, you got the sense that it was something of great interest in, you know, Western capitalist countries or whatever, right? But I was surprised, for example, like going to Cuba this year, that they had like all night like viewings of Game of Thrones, right? That like it just felt like it's something that you felt everybody in the whole world was experiencing at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's also interesting about movies, because, you know, before you'd have movies released in America, you know, and then 6 months later or a year later they come to Britain. Yeah, it had a time component to it. Whereas now it's all kind of pretty much released at the same time. Everyone's experiencing, or has the potential to experience, the same thing at the same time everywhere. And what we're experiencing, or kind of, you know, two of the dominant things of the last, I don't know, 7 years, say, or 6 years, has been Marvel and Game of Thrones. And I just wondered if you had anything to say.
Well, that's why I was going to pick up on that, because when you said cinema used to be, it showed in America, then it showed here, it is still that way. It's, except for the very biggest, like it's the Marvel films and the big blockbusters and stuff. They have the worldwide releases simultaneously.
Yes.
But you think about other things, like, you know, when it gets to awards season, all the films coming out in November, December in America, we're not going to see here till January, February, March.
Yes, it's
true.
Know,
so it still works that way with the smaller things.
Yes.
But it's the event stuff that is simultaneous.
It's a global event. Yes.
Exactly. And that's what Game of Thrones has been. That's been a big simultaneous event, from what I understand. Like, but I mean, it was shown in America, the equivalent of 2 a.m. this morning for us.
Yes.
I don't know when it's being shown on TV here. Maybe there was a simulcast here at that time. I mean,
I don't know.
It will be shown here very, very shortly. You know what I mean? So there is this kind of, there's no waiting for the rest of the world to catch up with Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Anyway, any last words on this episode?
Well, you know, I'm glad I rounded it off. I mean, it's kind of interesting to watch it all in one go, because it's something that has been, for the better part of 10 years, you know, a kind of a staple show for people. And basically, I come in and go, I've spent a month and a half of my life on this, and now I can forget it. You know, so it's much easier for me not to be let down by it. You know what I mean? Because I've got a lot less invested in it, which is maybe why I pick out certain positives that you haven't in the final episode.
Yes.
Because you feel maybe there's more of a portrayal of what the world has been building or whatever.
Yes, perhaps. Anyway, it's a show that I've loved very much, though, you know, it's kind of, it's one of those things, really. I have tremendously enjoyed it. But I also feel that, like, some of the claims that people make for it are quite exaggerated, you know.
I think it's a trifle.
Yeah.
Genuinely. It's a very expensive, beautiful, very nicely produced trifle with lots of really great scenes and things, but it's a trifle.
I would rate it higher than a trifle. For me, it's like, it's something like Gone with the Wind, you know, it's very entertaining. It has kind of, you can understand why people love it. Really, and it's something that's bound to engross people for years to come, and yet it's not quite art. You know, it doesn't try to be, it doesn't attempt to say anything kind of difficult or complex, or, you know, about kind of what it is to be human or what the world is like, or, you know, it is all about kind of achieving a very particular kind of audience response to kind of what is being dramatized.
I mean, I think it did have a bit of that. Like I say, when it was in that mode of the world being genuinely unpredictable and dangerous, and not knowing quite what would happen next and what the place was for people and things, I think it had an element of that. Like, that seemed thematically interesting, and I think that has, the latter kind of half of the show, did away with that, or had no interest in that. I think and became more interested in, as you were sort of saying, its own mythos, its own, you know, kind of its characters' fates and what they're supposed to be and how they're all going to manoeuvre them into place for their final resting places, sort of thing. You know, it was much more interesting when it was like, we really could just make this up on the spot. what happens next.
Though paradoxically, my understanding is that, I don't know, X amount of seasons follow the books very closely.
I think it's something like 4 or 5.
Yeah, and then the series has superseded the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I think they're working from like.
So maybe it actually was
things.
better when it used the books as a.
It may have been
as a blueprint, right?
Although I've also read things. I've not read the books predictably.
I have, but I can't remember them.
I've also read things saying that there are many aspects in which the show is superior to the books, including a really grimy sort of degree of sexism in the books, from what I understand.
I can't remember that either. I mean, I was ill for a while, and what I do remember is I was engrossed in those books.
Yeah.
Like, they really made time pass, and, you could spend, like, the whole day in them. And actually that was very helpful when I wasn't feeling very well. But actually, they can't have been that good because I barely remember anything about it. So...
You don't think... we were mentioning whether it's art or not, or what makes it art. The thing about one of the creators of the show... And let me just find the quote very quickly because it's a lovely quote. This is from an article on Grantland in 2013, and this done the round. People have probably heard this. When I asked Benioff and Weiss, which are the two creators of the show, obviously the writer of the novels is George R.R. Martin. When I asked Benioff and Weiss if it was possible to infer any overall intentionality to the upcoming 10 episodes, they sneered. Themes are for 8th grade book reports, Benioff told me.
But that's not true.
Well, it's not true. But coming from the guy who made the show,
yeah,
Jesus.
I mean, but it's also not true of the show. Yeah, there are themes that are explored in each of the seasons. It's absurd.
Yeah. So why do you think he denied that? It's funny because I think if it's like a macho thing, like I'm not interested in themes. I'm just interested in cutting off people's heads. And there's weirdly, I kind of makes me think of how many people in this show have their dicks cut off. Like, there's a whole army of people without dicks, and there's Theon, who has his dick off, and he's kind of emasculated and that sort of thing, and then people constantly make reference to him not having a dick. There's Varys, who is a eunuch, and people are, again, constantly making jokes about that. It's funny, like, there is a kind of...
There is a thing about that.
Like
it's
a stupid
true.
Macho sort of. Well, if you haven't got a dick, you're not a man.
Yes.
And is that reflecting the kind of time and place it's supposed to be vaguely set in, or is it the show speaking?
Well, the thing about what is a man and being a man and so on is one of the themes of the shows. The whole character of Tyrion is about that.
Yeah.
So, that's definitely one of the things. Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap it up here.
There's that thing, and the fun, there's Podrick, who has a magic cock, and they never revisited that, and I was very disappointed.
I can't even remember.
Podrick is he's just this young lad who ends up being Brienne's squire, but he's
I remember him. Yes,
I think he's also Tyrion's squire as well, and like for a birthday present, Tyrion and Bronn, I think, buy him 3 prostitutes, and then he comes back and he also gives them their gold back, and they say, didn't you pay them? They said no, they didn't want paying, and there's this whole thing about how he has a magic cock and no one knew, but they didn't revisit that. I really wanted them to.
Isn't he the one that ended up with the younger one, the younger Stark?
Arya. Did he end up with her?
I thought
no. There's a guy who looks similar. That's Robert Baratheon's bastard son, who basically doesn't show up for a long time, which allows you to get him confused with Podrick.
Right.
But it's not the same guy. I can't remember his name. It begins with G. That's a different bloke though. But they do look the same.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Righto. Well.
Anyway.
Thank you very much for listening.
I mean, that kind of conversation is a fun one. To be fair, like
I have not heard about Podrick's magic.
Well, you just don't remember the episode. But that's one of the things. Like it is a show where you can just get into the weeds and go, oh, I like this character, I like that character, I like the story, and so on. You can talk for 15 hours about it, which is, for the show's various flaws and faults and whatever. That's good fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping on the movies today. Eavesdropping on something that may or may not be television.
It is television. It just is television. It's just expensive television. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud and YouTube to listen to. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.